Kia ora and welcome to week 6 of fiction writing. I thought I'd devote this week's video to talking about revision a little bit, since many of you are currently revising or about to start revising your story from your draft to your final. So just thought I'd start off by distinguishing between sort of 3 different levels of revision. The first level of revision is oftentimes what people think I mean when I say revision, but really I would call it more editing and proofing. So proofing is just sort of checking for spelling and, punctuation and things, and it's the kind of level that you should do with even an email. Editing is a little more sophisticated, but still not quite revision. Editing is just sort of thinking, maybe I'll change the scene, or I'll write out this character, or I'll change the end of the sentence, or maybe I don't need this paragraph. And revision implies more holistic changes, and particularly the kind of revision I'm talking about is what I would call deep revision. So revision might say, I don't like the ending. I'll change this ending. Or, the tone isn't right. And that sort of revision. What I'm talking about is deep revision. And for me, the process I'm about to describe is a process of deep revision. So really taking a holistic new look at your story. If I were to deeply revise my story, how would that go? Well, this is what I would do in this course. After my workshop, I would read my peer review, and I would look at my notes from workshop, think about the things that the other workshop members have said to me, think about what my tutor said to me, think about my own feelings of the story, what's strong about the story, what's weak about the story, what's interesting about the story, and I would process all those. So I would sleep on them for a night or two. Sort of carry them around with me and really, really consider them. And then when I went to revise, this is what I would recommend. I would open up my original document or have my original pad of paper with my original story on it sitting next to me. And I would have a new notebook or a new page or open up a new document in Word or wherever I'm working. And I would start with that blank document. And this is what I mean by holistic writing. Am I going to take anything from that draft? Yes, I am. But this is what I would do. I would first look through that draft. And based on everything that I've processed and pondered, I would ask myself the question, where's the center? Where's the emotional core of this draft? And I would write that in that new document. Or I would copy and paste it if I can get away with that, if it's pretty much in place already. Maybe I'll copy and paste it and tweak it a little bit. But I might have to write it from scratch because I might not have actually explored the emotional core of the story in that first draft. So I would write that emotional core down. And then I would ask myself a question, something like this. I would ponder the tension around a kind of core like that. So let's say my story was about someone who's grieving over the death of a very good friend. And I would say, what could go wrong? What could go right in a story about grieving over the death of a friend? What could go right is that I could sort of come to peace with this, come to terms with this, and carry on with my life, right? What could go wrong is that it would continue to plague me, and I would continue to be despairing or depressed, or it would get in the way of my day-to-day living. So that's the sort of kind of fundamental tension. I can change that and tweak that as I go, but that seems to capture it. So then I'd look at my draft and I'd say, how much of my material contributes to this tension? How much is about sort of what could go right or what could go wrong? If there is some, I would copy and paste that into the new document, and I would rewrite it, and I would increase it. And I would say, well, you know what, this is sort of about the tension, but not quite. Maybe if she had this thought or if she saw this thing, it might sort of increase it a little bit. And if I looked in my draft and I saw that there was absolutely nothing there that in any way contributed to developing the tension and making things go right or making things go wrong, I would rewrite. So I would rewrite. So I had a story that was focused on that emotional core and the tensions around that emotional core. Okay? And as I wrote, I would allow myself the freedom to change. I would allow myself to ask questions like, is there a more interesting story in this material? I would even allow myself to ask big questions like, is this story really about grieving a loved one at all? Is it more about sort of the dissatisfaction in my own life that I discovered through the process of thinking about grieving a loved one? So I'd ask myself that question. I'd allow myself to write a new story. I'd open myself to new directions. And I'd allow this material, once it had accreted around this emotional core, And once I knew what the fundamental tensions were, I would allow myself to be distracted. I would allow myself to go on tangents. Now, of course, this kind of process assumes that I'm not going to rewrite the story in one draft. But we've been talking about that from the beginning, and this is where the usefulness of a daily habit of fiction writing comes in quite handy in the revision process. If I'm already sitting down to write every morning, I simply make this revision the center of my writing practice for that day. So that's kind of what I have in mind. I often talk about sort of deep revision and holistic revision, and another word that I sometimes use is re-envisioning, but it means really trying to take what's most interesting out of a story at the deepest level and to rework the entire story. That is, let characters come and go, settings change, even the theme of the story change, as long as that emotional center sort of stays in place and I work with it. And that's what I mean by holistic revision. So I hope that you're all undertaking some holistic revisions on your work. In some cases, your tutor may say, actually, I don't think much holistic revision is required. And if you specifically receive that instruction, I think that then you might be more of the first order of revision, of just kind of saying, I'm going to tweak the ending, I'm going to rewrite the beginning. I just don't think the language is very strong here. But I think even if your story is working pretty well, you're going to at least be on that first order of revision. I hope all of you, no matter how strong your stories are really getting into revision and getting above the level of editing and proofing. So I wish you luck. The mid-semester break is coming up. I hope that you'll continue to read and write during the mid-semester break, and we'll resume things, and I'll resume these videos after the mid-semester break when we start in week 7 in September. So happy reading and writing to you all.